Good day, everybody. I have a question for you. Is today a day of opportunity, or is today a day that you're going to play it safe? I hate that question. I'm often asked that question a lot. For you and I who are on this call, we have to do both. We have to both drive innovative change, and we have to manage our risk well. I'm Brian Turner. I'm the CEO of Point B. I'm joined by our national healthcare leader, Cicely Donaldson, and between the two of us, we have over 50 years of combined experience helping organizations drive really big change. And this question on innovative change and managing risk, well, it's at the heart of all the decisions we get to make as executives. What projects we invest in, what roadmaps we create, what steering committees we have, what go live decisions we make. It is the ultimate game of dominoes, if you want to think of it that way. And there's no better place to talk about dominoes than the ever-changing landscape of healthcare.
Thank you, Brian. Nice to be here with you today. No, you're exactly right. The stakes in healthcare right now are really high, and the how organizations think about driving transformation and really driving business outcomes through that transformation is very critical, and particularly as we think about technology and the role technology plays in that. As you know, Brian, technology is rapidly advancing, and it's at the center of both innovation and streamlining ways of working. And it's really becoming an imperative for organizations to stay viable and to stay competitive in this environment. And the thing that I think will hit home with everyone on this call today that sits in this industry is this need to really balance focusing on reducing costs, improving patient care, and creating a more integrated experience. Technology plays a critical role in all three, but it is a balancing act, and the balancing act of how much change can you push in your organization at any given time? What are your risks? And how do you make those trade-off decisions?
Well, let's dig in a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about how this balancing act shows up for a lot of healthcare leaders today.
It's really interesting. We see organizations really responding to technology in particular on a spectrum. There are some organizations that I would consider more progressive in leading that are willing to test out new automation, AI technologies, really embracing digital and embracing it in clinical settings, which is allowing clinicians to work at the top of their license and to not be as burdened by administrivia, which is also causing a lot of burnout. So, I'm always impressed when I see organizations that are testing the edge there. Obviously, safeguarding risks around some of these more emerging technologies. The second part of the spectrum should be more in the middle, which is where we see a majority of organizations, which is focusing on those foundational technologies that are really needed to shore up legacy technology and to begin to harmonize data across front end and back office systems, whether that's looking at your ERP, your CRM, your contact center, your EHR, combination of all the above. There's a lot of focus here to making sure that that legacy technology is in place so that the organizations can really leverage that more advanced technology. And then lastly, we do see a cohort of organizations that I would consider more on the lagging side from a technology standpoint. That's either because they're financially constrained and really hunkering down, frankly, on the basics, or because they are a little bit more on the risk adverse side. I would say from our perspective, organizations that are adopting technology, they really are increasing their competitive advantage and making strides towards improving costs and employee experience when implemented well. And I put an emphasis on when implemented well, because that is really key in how organizations can drive value. It's very complex, as you know, Brian.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about implementing well, in particular, the role of the senior executive in setting the table well for it to run well. And so, part of this is to oversimplify, what are we all after? We want to get, we want to get what we want, and we want happy people and happy customers with the amount of resources that we're willing to put into that endeavor and the amount of risk that we want to take. And so, thinking about starting it from that place of, well, given that, as you look across thousands of projects, and Cicely, we've been in so many together, and we've used outside research firms to help anchor our findings. We know the things that either shape the success or drive the failure of the largest initiatives that our clients take across industry. If we look at that and we really roll that up to what are the three things that senior executives get to control, I look at it like there's three key levers. One is the scope of change. The second is how you engage your organization. And the third is the pace of change. And so I just want to talk a little bit about each of them, and then Cicely, get your kind of take on how does that show up in a healthcare setting. The scope of change, thinking about the dominoes game, it's like, which dominoes on the board do I want to impact? Given what I'm trying to achieve, and knowing that resources are scarce, expectations are high, and everything is interconnected, well, just what part of that dominoes board am I working with? And there, I think, a lot of it gets down to getting very specific and very focused on the problem that you're trying to solve, and solving that problem, learning from it, and then scaling it across the rest of the organization. And then trying to keep all of the other dominoes that you don't want to impact quiet. The second is, how do you engage your organization? We know it's not the technology that drives the success or the failure of an initiative. It is the impact on people and the way work gets done in the organization. And so as a senior executive, you got to plan for it. And it starts with you really understanding what is required by the changes that you're trying to implement, and what are the key areas of impact. And then you got to staff for it, both at the leadership level, like the governance of the endeavor, like making sure you've got really good representation across the organization, and at the project level. And then your role changes as the executive. Now it's really interrogating your team of like, how does that plan? And how does your team ensure that all the connection points happen, and that you've got the right cross-functional representation and the right expectations and incentives to connect the dots the right way? The third lever is pace of change. And, here's the real art. There's no one else in the organization that really gets to shape, well, how quickly do we go, or how slow do we go? It is really the senior executive. And you have to be super dialed into, well, what is happening to your organization? What are your people telling you? And what do you need to achieve? And how much risk do you want to take? And at that point, you play the role of negotiator a little bit, because you're going to have to negotiate your vision, what you want to achieve, into a place that your team can deliver and your organization can absorb and assimilate to in order to get the result that you want. And so with those three levers, Cicely, I would love to know, like, how do they show up in a healthcare setting?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think those three levers and those three factors are really important, and they're very real. And I see examples of them showing up every day in healthcare. I wanted to anchor back to your point around focusing on driving specific outcomes with your technology versus enterprise-wide. I would say what I'm seeing in healthcare right now is the need to look and act more broadly for organizations to move out of their silos, to really get more connected in their data and the view of the patient. And that brings a lot of complexity to your earlier point. I wanted to just touch on a few areas where I'm seeing value being delivered in some of those cross-functional efforts and initiatives, because I think it's really good for folks in the audience to think about and to hear that while it's difficult, there is real value to be had. And I'd like to push people's thinking in how to unlock that cross-functional value. So as I mentioned previously, there's a lot of table stakes foundational work happening across the industry right now. The one area where I'm seeing a lot of promise and that cross-functional value is in the harmonization of data and how you leverage advanced analytics and digital technologies to unlock that power. The second area where we're seeing a lot of cross-functional value in technology is leveraging automation to automate and streamline manual processes. We
Mhm.
recently worked with a client to automate an audit that would have otherwise taken roughly 100 FTEs to lean into manually. We were able to leverage automation to pare that number way back to a handful of people, and we saved them close to $2.5 million.
Wow.
So that's the unlocking the art of the impossible, the art of what may feel like it's
Yeah.
impossible into the possible. A couple other areas where we're seeing some real power in that cross-functional view. We're working with a client right now in co-creating on a product. It's a operations orchestration product that essentially streamlines processes across multiple teams, multiple touch points into an integrated platform that allows the organization to have a full end-to-end view of processes and data and where people's role touches each step of the way, which is driving significant improvement. Use cases such as clinical trial, orchestration, AEP, provider credentialing. These are all very complex areas of the industry where technology can play a key role. And then lastly, I'm going to touch on the clinical areas because these are the areas that have the potential to have the highest impact, but they also have risk. And some organizations are a little bit more leery. I would say the areas that we've seen a lot of value is leveraging automation to streamline burdensome documentation, particularly as it relates to the EMR, and the piloting of ambient voice recognition and AI has proven to provide a lot of value and ROI. So I would encourage organizations to not be shy to tackle those bigger, more complex, high value areas because there's real value to be had.
I love that. I think underneath that, one of the things we haven't talked about is the role of culture. And, as I think about a senior executive, you really do, you are the flag bearer of culture and collaboration inside your organization. What advice would you give a healthcare leader on that front?
Brian, you touched on this earlier, so I'm just going to come back to it. As we think about organizations and the need to drive that cross-functional value, it really does start at the top. It starts with that executive alignment, making sure everyone is very, very clear on the common vision, the common outcome that they're looking to drive at that enterprise level, that governance is stood up, that decision making is clear. All of these things sound extremely basic, but when you get inside an organization, it becomes very complex as you're trying to navigate outcomes, create value across teams. So start with a shared vision, shared set of outcomes and metrics that you're driving towards, and then foster that culture of collaboration and balancing collaboration with accountability and results. And what I love is when you see organizations do this well, it creates a whole groundswell of creating a different way of working and a different way of unlocking value in future initiatives. So those are a few things that
Yeah.
I have seen.
As they say, culture eats strategy. And it does resonate. I think about even my own journey. I probably spend now 2/3 of my time on our own transformations, really on vision and the culture of that change and how it relates to the things that, well, our company cares about. So thank you for that perspective. I'd love to know like what's on the horizon. Particularly there's a lot of cool things that technology can bring to bear in this healthcare setting. Look out, Cicely, and tell me what you see on the horizon and what it might mean.
Yeah, I would really keep an eye on the more progressive and emerging technologies. There's a lot to be proven out. We're seeing a lot of early value in complex areas like prior authorization, clinical data exchange, precision medicine. As I mentioned earlier, this ambient voice recognition and documentation capabilities are already showing ROI and reducing that burden on our clinical workforce. Also, as I look at the data and what the data is telling us, investments in the first half of this year are showing really positive signs with a focus on those administrative workflows, as I mentioned before, R&D, disease management. And those are areas that are generating a lot of attention and have the potential to continue to drive a lot of transformation and value that is really needed in our industry.
So given all that, what advice would you give the healthcare leader watching this?
Brian, I'm going to come back to something we've been talking about throughout this conversation, which is be myopically focused on the business outcome you are looking to achieve and the value you are looking to create. Take a very thoughtful approach on your technology strategy and what technologies are going to help you achieve that. We see organizations sometimes, they see the bright, shiny object, and the technology isn't actually the right technology for their organization, or they think technology is going to solve a problem that is really a problem that they have around culture, process. So be really thoughtful and strategic. Make sure you do an assessment and that you select the right technology, and that, to the earlier point in our conversation, you have a very integrated and thoughtful path to execution. I would lastly say your workforce is your power. So in healthcare, engage your clinical leaders, engage your frontline staff. They have great perspectives and they will help you make this a success.
I love that. Well, I think about where we started. And this is a day, this is a time period where it is both a place of opportunity and a place to play it safe with the things that really matter to your organization. I would encourage you to be bold and courageous and to think about, as the executive, what levers do you have to pull on? One is the scope and breadth of change that you're introducing, what dominoes you're going to impact. Two is how you're going to engage your organization. And three is setting the pace of change. And underneath all of that is just a reminder of your role as the cultural leader of your organization, and how does that allow you to tell a different story and really drive the mind share and momentum that you want in an organization. We look forward to talking with you more in the future, and thank you for watching.